Yeah,
Yeah.
we have to wear them in most places. Pretty much like if I walk on the beach or something like that, it's not a big deal. Some towns have like $300 fine if you're not wearing it, but most places, like Home Depot, you can't go in there without a mask, stuff like that. Where are you located?
I'm in a suburb of Rochester, New York. So we've, New York City got hit the hardest. I'm in upstate New York, so we didn't get hit as hard, but our governor's been pretty strong on, he was very slow, but it looks like he was probably one of the smarter ones compared to what's happening around the country. So,
Yeah.
but,
Yeah, we just started to be able to, eat indoors at a restaurant, but like every other table is closed and stuff like that.
right. Yeah, we're in the same boat there. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
so.
So I've already started the recording just in case we say something really,
Okay.
really exciting and great and that we really want to keep. But,
Sure.
and what I'd like to do, even though, it's a podcast, so obviously it's going to be audio, but I like to make the video available because I know some people,
Okay. Yeah.
might like prefer to see the people if they're, listening at home or whatever.
Right. Right.
So as long as that's good for you.
Yep. I'm very comfortable with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't,
Thank you.
Yeah.
I figured you would be, and you're not going to be like the women I interview, like, well, I didn't put any lipstick on today. So I really don't want you to.
This is what you got, Christine.
Yeah, that's how I feel. This is the package, whatever, But so talking about the stuff like all the COVID changes, it's had a huge impact, obviously, on team sports.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not coaching anymore, but I still have a lot of friends that are, and it's very difficult because there's just so many questions. I coached at the high school level most of my career, so there's still questions on whether the kids are going to be able to go back to school. I know that's what everybody wants, including myself, but I don't know that. It's just as I told my wife, it was for me. I guess I haven't been as scared of COVID as maybe I should be. I don't know. But I will say that what has been concerning is, because, when basically everything was shut down there in March. And then, as it's turning out, it looks like, some of the states made a bad decision in opening up too early. And now it's spreading like wildfire in some parts of the country. So that's concerning, because the sad part is it's going to affect everybody. And bringing up your team sports is going to be really interesting to see, because Major League Baseball and NBA basketball are supposed to start in 3 weeks. And I don't know, I'm hoping, but it's, and then I've become an avid tennis player, and so I'm hoping they'll run the U.S. Open, but I think there's still a lot of questions with that as well. So,
Yeah, I'm thinking too about team sports for kids. That has a lot. What do you think is going to happen? What impact does playing team sports have on kids? How does it help?
I think it's going to have a major impact because what people I don't think realize sometimes is, in coaching, because I was a teacher and a coach for over 3 decades, but the bond you get in, being a coach of a team with those student athletes, there's not many stronger bonds other than a family. And, the fact that the thing that I love so much about coaching is I thought I could really have an opportunity to make an impact, because you're seeing those kids every single day. And then in a lot of sports, and the basketball was my, major sport, we were year round. So, so I was seeing those kids, not just during the 4 months of the season, but literally, other than a couple of weeks, we'd give them off here and there. I'm seeing them every day. So, so you build a really strong relationship with a lot of them. And it's because you are seeing them so much, you can make a really big impact, obviously positively, or it could be negatively, but you're certainly hoping that that's on the positive. So I think that's, and, there's just so many valuable lessons at, the high school level, with, building camaraderie, building relationships, how to work together as a team, that, are all things that are going to carry over to, life. So I think that's going to be, and I feel really bad for, all our athletes in our area lost, the spring season. They didn't play a second. And then for me, basketball wise, I had two seniors in college, one at a Division I and one at a Division II. That the Division II, the young man, he was his senior year, and they qualified for the NCAA tournament. And he didn't get to play, and then one of the best players I ever coached had a great career at the University of Vermont, and they were in the championship of their conference tournament that they didn't get to play. And he could have gone to the NCAA tournament for the third time in 4 years. So those are things you're never going to get back. So those are tough. But I guess just to come back to that is that there's just so many things that I think sports can be positive for young people, that I think it's going to be very impactful. Just like I think, if you extend it to school, I mean, it's great that we do have a lot of things online like we're doing right now, but at the same time, to me, there's still nothing like the human, being in the same place and, and having that kind of connection, which I don't think you're going to ever be able to replace. I mean, I know there's going to be a new normal. You're going to see things like Zoom meetings. It's going to be more than it used to be. But to me, there's still nothing. It's like for me speaking, I'm making a pivot. I'm doing virtual presentations. I've just got hired for a couple. But it's not what I really want to do. I like getting, going to places and being in front of an audience and, trying to make an impact and meeting those people. And so it's a whole different world for my business as well. So.
It's true that it's that energy that you get from being in a room with other people. And,
Right.
I don't know. And I feel like for kids in team sports, that's a big distraction for them, a big,
Mhm.
positive use of their time that,
Yeah.
I know my nephew, I mean, all he's sitting around doing video games all day long, I
Yeah.
mean, that's not, I don't think
No.
that's going to have any positive impact on him,
No, exactly. In fact, I just talked to my mother today, and I think I think she's got COVID. She hasn't gotten tested yet, but one of my sisters, I'm the oldest of six. Her son's a good little athlete, and that's what she's been complaining to my mother that all he's doing is playing is on his the computer games or whatever they are. I'm not into that,
Yeah.
but you're right. I mean, they're just it's changed the world, and unfortunately, right now, I don't think for the better. Although we're going to learn a lot of different things from this for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But yeah, being a kid and not being able to play with other kids, I just think that's,
yeah,
yeah,
it's
adults
really
might learn something, but I think for kids, it's going to be really tough.
yeah, no doubt.
So Jim, did you right out of school? Did you know that you wanted to be? Were you a coach right away? Is that what you
Well, I
started
grew
out?
up my mother was an elementary teacher. My dad was actually a physical education teacher and also my basketball coach in high school. Although I was the only one that played for him. I had three younger brothers, and he actually went into administration. I guess after having 3 years with me, that was enough. so, yeah, so athletics was a big part of me growing up. As I kid people, in some of my talks that my dream was to play in the NBA, but when I got cut from my college team, I realized the NBA wasn't going to be the option.
Yeah.
So when that reality hit me, that I realized that in coaching, I've been retired now for this, be coming up on 5 years, and it's still in my blood. I mean, there's been some temptations, although I enjoy a lot of the things I do now with speaking, and I have more free time to do some other things in life. But I will say, anybody that's coached for a period of at least 5 years, they probably know what I'm talking about. It gets in your blood, and uh, I've told a lot of my colleagues that for me, because basketball coaching was so important, it was like it was on my mind almost every single day. There wasn't, and so I was always thinking, how can I make these things better? How can I, all the different facets of, trying to build a team, which is, a lot of things I talk about in my talks now. So, once it gets in your blood, it's like anything, and finding your passion in life. And that was certainly one of my major ones, without a doubt.
Yeah, it's fortunate you were able to find it early and make a
Yeah,
living doing it, right?
right, exactly.
And teamwork and leadership, I mean, obviously that extrapolates to everything, right? I mean,
Yeah, the interesting thing for me, Christine, is that when I became a head coach at a pretty young age. I was 25 years old, and that was my dream. You know, when I got out of college, I actually was an assistant coach at the high school I graduated from, and for 1 year, and then I was the JV coach at another school. In my community, I live in a town called Greece, which is the biggest suburb of Rochester, and we had 3 high schools. Now we actually have 4, and so and then after 3 years as an assistant, I became a head coach at a school about 20 minutes from where I grew up. And the interesting thing is, I thought I knew everything about coaching. I mean, we had a couple winning seasons at the younger levels, and I'm taking over this program that hasn't been very good. But in my mind, I'm like, oh, I'm maybe I'll turn this around. Well, as I kid people, I led that team to 17 consecutive losses, and then they ended up letting me go. I was on an interim position, and they didn't rehire me, so it was a really humbling. But in reflection, as much as it was very disappointing and frustrating at that time, my wife and I just bought a home, and I lost my job, so that was a good. But it ended up being a great experience for 2 reasons. One is that it put a burn in my belly that never went away, that I was going to prove that they made a mistake and let me go. Unfortunately, that turned out good. And the second thing is, it really woke me up that I had to understand how to be a better leader. And so I've really, since 25 years old, I've read over 1,000 books on teamwork and leadership and success. I mean, it drives me. I'm always trying to, the one, I guess, real positive for me for the COVID thing is I've been doing a walk every day where I listen to a podcast. A lot of them are leadership. So I can't get enough. Leadership is, to me, where it all starts, and trying to figure out how to be a better leader yourself, and then how to teach people how to become a leaders. And so that's why I do a whole presentation on the 7 keys that I've developed. Certainly a bunch of them are things that are, people know, but I really tried to synchronize them into how I could lead myself better, and how I could lead and develop a team out of these 7 keys. So that's when I learned that foundation. I went from that first year of losing the job and winning 1 game as a coach to, at the end of my career, when the smoke had cleared, I was fortunate to be a coach that won over 400 games. So, things changed for the positive.
Well, I'll say that's very impressive. Very impressive. And do you sort of, you put it down to leadership? Do you think that, because trying to get however many people are on the team to all kind of, I mean, obviously we know we have to win the game, but there's a lot of different ways to win the game, right? And how do you get everybody, singing from the same hymnal, if you will? Or
I think that the huge thing is, I learned about leadership that helped me immensely is that, I think winning, just like, having success in almost anything, is that it's a byproduct of having a system in place, and then being able to continue to grow yourself and then grow the people around you. And if you do that, and then I think what happens is, when you start developing success, as long as you don't get static, where you don't continue to grow yourself, you become attractive. Like, kids wanted to come into our program because we were successful. And that was something that I think, as a leader, you got to keep building. And the other thing, like, I'm often asked, especially because I talk a lot of business now, and people say, Coach, how do you get to the top? And, and I take them through this process. But I said the second thing is, I think the harder question is, how do you stay at the top? And I have a couple ideas on that I think, because it took me 20 years as a head coach before we won our first championship here locally. But then in my last 11 years, we made the finals 8 times and won 6. So once we got through that big barriers, for me, that was my 4-minute mile, is that, then I really started to figure out on the team dynamics and how we could keep it going, not just, that one hit wonder, where you win once and then where did that person go, so.
They never hear from you again after that.
Right.
Yeah. And I mean, even, I'm thinking about a lot of our listeners who are, our kind of theme is financial independence and long life. So people are, they're where they are in their job doing whatever, but they want to transition into some place where they're being financially independent and things like that. And I think unless you want to do everything yourself for the rest of your life, or you're never going to be able to succeed unless you can lead a team, unless you can get people to be on board with your vision, with your goal. And,
right.
and that's, another big thing. I mean, can you just talk a little bit about about goals and about how, you know, you can take your goal and incorporate everyone else and, you know, just um, have people see and share your vision.
Right. So let me say one thing about vision, then I'll get into your goal question. Is that, see, I think the huge thing that changed my life when things started to get better for me was the first thing is, and this is something I really share with people, and I strongly urge, you know, you people are listening, is that be clear about who you are. You know, like a question I ask is, do you have your own personal mission statement? And you know, and I go into detail of all I learned. And just for example, like my mission statement is to be an outstanding role model that makes a positive difference in the world by helping others make their dreams come true. And when I broke that down, I started thinking about, you know, what was important to me every day. And certainly I didn't do that every day. I made mistakes like everybody else, but I always go back, am I being a great role model? All right. And then number two is, how am I finding ways to serve others so they can be successful? Because, you know, that's how you become successful. Then going to goal setting, I think it's really important when you're talking about a team. There's two important things leaders got to do. Number one is you got to set team goals, and everybody's got to have clarity on that. And you also got to have an overall program mission. Like our mission was to develop winners on and off the court, and we would define that on a daily basis, what that meant, not just winning on the scoreboard. That was part of what we were looking for. And then from there is, we would always, after my team was picked every year, we would go to my house and we would have a goal setting meeting. We would talk about our goals. We would put them down on paper. Everyone had a copy. But then the other thing that I think sometimes as leaders we forget is, you know what, the people on your team have individual goals. And as a leader, you better know what they are. And so what I would do at that is I would teach them, you know, how to be a better goal setter. And then I would give them a guideline sheet. And then they would fill out goals, both about basketball and some things about life. You know, we had an academic goal and things. And then we would meet one-on-one. And, you know, so they would share what they were thinking. And then what my job was is to be aware of what they wanted, but also how did that fit in with the team? And I think that's really important as a leader, that you have clarity of that. I'll divert something because I know you said about financial independence. And I just shared is that I think that is a subject that's taboo to a lot of people. They don't want to talk about it. All right. And so I'm a big Jim Rohn fan. I don't know if you know Jim Rohn. You know, he's passed away many years ago, but I listen to his programs all the time. And he said a statement that was so powerful to me that changed my life financially. I was in my 30s. Fortunately, my wife and I were not credit card people. So we weren't in major debt. You know, we had car payments, house payment, but we didn't have credit card debt. So that was a positive for us. But we had no savings. We had no clue. And so I started listening to Jim Rohn in my late 20s. So one day I'm listening to one of his seminars, and he says, if you want to be wealthy, you should study wealth. And I'm like, wow, that's pretty simple. I'd rather be wealthy as opposed to being poor. Yet right now I'm kind of poor, but it's because I don't know anything about wealth building. And the unfortunate thing is, because I talk to college kids and stuff, and sometimes I'll break off because I have like this financial independence program that I talk about, that I share with young people. And I, you know, and one of the things I talk about is, you know, do you know what your net worth is? And I kid people, you know, I was in my early 30s and my net worth was below zero, which isn't good. And, you know, now fortunately, my net worth is well over $1 million. And it's just simply because I established a plan that I started to stick to, convinced my wife to stick to. And, you know, and now we're pretty well off. I mean, we're not Bill Gates wealthy, but we're doing fine, you know. And the nice part about this is, as much as I don't want COVID to affect anybody, but it's affected my business. But the fortunate thing is I'm fine, you know, because I'm financially independent. I did a smart job of, you know, between my pension and the amount of money that I save, and we have no debt. So those are pretty good things. And if I can emphasize one thing to all the listeners, I know I'm diverting from what my main thing is being a coach, but I think is that you can't stay ignorant. That's an important thing in your life. You have to understand and get a plan of how you can be financially independent. Just like going back to, you know, when I started to have success, we had a plan. We had certain things that we were going to do consistently constantly to do well, with always the idea is that, if you find a better way to do it, add that. But you got to have those basic fundamentals. You talk about in sports, but that's life too. There's only about 5, 6, 7 fundamentals in almost everything in life. And if you don't know what those are and you're not practicing them consistently, then like people say, like I just saw a guy the other day in a positive that I played tennis for the first time in 6 months, and he had lost 30 pounds. And I thought this was awesome. But I was telling him, there's guys that I haven't seen in 6 months and they gained 30 pounds and they can't understand why. I'm like, well, think about some of the things, are you eating more than you're exercising? I mean, we all know a lot of the things we should be doing. It's just, again, I always talk about putting, we talk about goal setting. I think it's so important that you put pen to paper and you have clarity. Because I always talk to people, I have a whole goal setting workshop that I do. And I always talk about, you can't hit a target you don't have. If you don't know what you want, how are you going to hit it? And so I think, those are, I know I got rambling on a few other subjects, but I think they all still come back to that core of understanding the fundamentals and then putting them into practice.
You're absolutely right. And so many people just think that either that financial independence is beyond them or that it's going to just happen. Right?
Right.
You don't have to be intentional about it. You just go do what you love. And then next thing you know, you'll be rich, right? You'll be fabulously wealthy. But if you're spending, right, we all have heard stories of, rock stars and millionaires who just, they're broke now because they weren't intentional about it. They weren't sitting down thinking, okay, I've got this money. What am I going to do with it? How am I going to, I'm all about passive income, how am I going to be able to sit home and get a paycheck, and that's, and then you,
it's funny because my wife, we have one son, and my son's an attorney. He makes a lot of money, and but I've taught him, I think, pretty well, and he's getting smart, and because but I'll give you an example. Like I heard this once speaker, how can you go broke making $15,000 a month? It's simple. You spend 16,000.
Right.
And that's really what it comes down to. So
absolutely, and that's the thing that a lot of people forget is lowering expenses.
Mm-hmm.
How can you suddenly become like The Millionaire Next Door? I don't know if you've ever read that book, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's all about, people who just lived, below their means.
Right.
And were smart about, investing what they had. But you're right. It's all about goals. It's all about setting that intention and saying, I do not want to work for the rest of my life. I do not want to be at the whim of some virus or some person or whatever. And, to decide whether I'm going to be successful or not.
Well, you said a really powerful word I just want to reemphasize is intention. And, I have a presentation I do, it's called the 10 questions all effective leaders should be able to answer. And they're simple questions, but they're also profound in the sense that people don't think about them. Like one of them is do you have a financial independence plan? Do you have a health plan? I mean, those are simple things, but you think about that, how many people actually do? I can tell you right now from the statistics, well, we're one of the countries that have the most overweight people in America, in the world, right? And we have a lot of people for supposedly the wealthiest country in the world that are broke. So obviously the message isn't getting to enough people. So.
For sure. And there probably aren't too many people that you could say, taking the overweight example, that don't know what they would need to do in order to be more slim,
Right.
It's just a mystery to me. I have no idea.
Right. I mean, the old adage, it's comical, but it's so much true. This is a rocket science, it's something that we all know. It's like, if you burn more calories than you put in your body, that's going to help if you, and vice versa. And, and it's good, but I'm hoping with COVID that people are going to really reflect and say, okay, well, what are the things that maybe I wasn't doing? Like I've been a big exercise person, so I haven't been out of shape in a long, long time. Yeah. But at the same time, like I've added something, like I do a 30 to 40-minute walk, but I also, I listen to a lot of podcasts now. So that's been a neat little thing that's been an addition for me because, I wanted to do something. For one, I want to get outside, so, and that was one way I could do something safely that was, actually very productive for me. So.
Yeah. And that's a good point. A lot of people get into being overwhelmed, right? I don't have time to learn this thing. I don't have time to read this book. I don't have time to be fit. And just doing what you're talking about, how can you're combining reading or learning with exercise. So,
Right.
multitasking, and it's not any more difficult to walk with headphones in than it is to walk without them. So, and that's the same
Exactly.
thing, going to work, I was, my commute was never far, I mean, I'm a real estate agent. Sometimes I do have to drive, 45 minutes
Right.
or something to somewhere, but I just have, an audio book in the car. And so no matter how far I'm going, no matter where I'm going, I'm entertained, and, I'm learning something. So
Right. Exactly.
there's some
Yeah.
excellent audiobooks
I,
out there.
I always go, I call it the 2 for 1. And go what you're saying is, in, three that I always bring up is, like, if I, my wife will say, can you clean up after dinner? And often, because I don't, dishes aren't my favorite thing to do. Or even like cutting the grass, like I'll go out, but I'll listen to an audio program. Or, if I can work out, like a walk, like I said, or like you said, I always call it the library on wheels, the opportunity. When you think of how much you actually drive now, I know, for example, me, I'm driving a lot less than you normally do,
Me too.
but
Yeah.
but at the same time, is every time you add up, because we go back to the word you had shared, and I re-emphasize is intention. Like, another question I ask is, do you have a personal growth plan? Like, my goal every day, I have to feed my mind a minimum of 60 minutes, and that's through reading, listen to audio programs. I'll listen to a TED talk. Do different things online, but and often I'm a lot of days I'm well over 2 hours. And so if I'm adding that much to my mind every single day, is that going to help me? It's got to help me. It's just it's the law of averages, right? You know,
Absolutely.
People always say, like, I wrote a blog back a while ago about the law of averages, and it's like, because people expect, and this was me too, don't get me wrong, I'm human like everybody else, because I was doing all these things, and we couldn't win a championship, and then we finally, but I kept saying to myself, is, if we keep doing enough of the right things fundamentally, things will work out, and that's what happened, is things started to explode in my life, because I started to be consistent with the fundamentals day in and day out. And when you do that, so sometimes, like, your crop doesn't come up, but you know what? If you keep after it, it does. And the nice part is a lot of times it'll blossom way bigger than you ever expect.
Yeah, that's for sure. And you're right. As you're when you make those goals or set those intentions, and you just write down, well, these are the things that are important to me, you realize, oh, okay, I want to learn a foreign language, and I've got this, how am I going to be able to do that? Well, I've got this hour in the car every morning, or, back and forth. I can start to listen to tapes, and you can start to see how you do have time to do these things. You
Right.
can meet these goals, but they can't just be this blue sky thing that's just
Right.
right out there, like, oh, someday I want to be able to, do this. Like,
Right.
it's someday doesn't come.
No, no. Yeah.
My mentor has us do, you have to write your obituary, how you want people
Mm.
to remember you. And when you start to think about that, like, why do you just want to be remembered as the person who, worked all the time, or the person who,
Right.
whatever, died of a heart attack at 40 years old because they were 500 pounds overweight. You really do have a way that you would like to be remembered, that you'd like people to think about you. And you just got to be intentional about writing it down and figuring out what it is or whatever. But
Right. Actually, ironically, I've been relearning, because I'm big on personal mission statement, as I said. So I've been actually listening to a Stephen Covey audio program on personal mission statement, and he, talk about your obituary. He said that he saw a interview of Norman Schwarzkopf, the general there, and he said, how would you want to be remembered? He says, I want to be remembered as a good soldier who served my country and loved my family. I'm like, wow, that's pretty powerful. As simple as that is, that's pretty powerful. So,
but once you figure that out, right, then you know what the steps are. You can just keep
right.
breaking things down smaller and smaller until you
Yeah.
have something you can do today in order to
Right.
be able to achieve that, right?
Right. Absolutely. And that's part of it, is that breaking it down so you can get started and start doing something. Like, when people, going back to your, fitness, which you exactly said is so right, is like, we all know, well, let's start with something simple. Like, I read a lot about habits, and have you ever read the book Atomic Habits by James Clear? It just came out in 2019, but he
No.
did a lot of studying on habits. And one thing he talked about is that the two things that jumped out to me, there were a lot of great things in the book, but he said that you've got to get in your mind to start something small. So he gives an example, like he got a friend just to drive to the gym every day and do 10 push-ups. That's all he asked them to do. And then, of course, he was there for 10 push-ups. So then he decided to go for a few more minutes. And then, now he's got in pretty good shape, right? And the other thing he said that I thought was really powerful is when you start something simple, put it in a discipline that you can't miss 2 days in a row. And it was like, just those two little simple things are really, really powerful. Just how you can get started. It's like, just go for a 10-minute walk. Just start. And then it's, because it's amazing when you start to do that, how it then you get some momentum, and then things start to accelerate, and then you feel better about yourself, and everything starts to flow because of that.
No, you're absolutely right. I saw a speaker one time. I wish I could remember who it was, but he just showed, like, here you are, and now you make one, like, minute positive change. Just like you
Mm-hmm.
spend, and I actually did this thing. I don't know. One of my conversations on this podcast was talking about each day walk for 1 minute, right? And then the next day, so walk for 1 minute, and then the next day add 1 minute,
Mm-hmm.
right? By the end of the month, you're doing 30 minutes. But
Right.
the activity involved in walking that 1 minute, that's all the hard stuff, right? Getting out
Right.
of bed a minute earlier than you used to, so that you could then get dressed and do your thing and walk around the house or whatever it is. And
Right.
that's all it is. It's just like that little tiny change that at the end of the road, you're so much further along, as opposed to if you make that one little change, oh, I'm just going to sleep for another 5 minutes
Right.
or another 1 minute, then you start to go down this way. And it's just, that it's like the law of the magic of compounding interest. It's like
Yeah.
the same way that works in your life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, the other book I just reread, I read it a few years ago. I actually saw her speak. Are you familiar with the 5-second rule by Mel
Yes.
Robbins?
Yes. Yes.
But same kind of concept. Her story very quickly. She was an attorney and kind of had some ups and downs. But she got to the point where she was so depressed she could not get herself out of bed, and she kept hitting the snooze. And then she said, "Okay, I'm going to give myself 5 seconds one day, and I got to get out of bed." And then she did all this research and realized how powerful, that simple 5-second rule is, that it's, it's just amazing. But you're absolutely right. Just starting a small little thing will just add to the momentum.
Yeah, it's huge. And now you started off as a coach and you followed your love, but even though coaching has so much that is actually applicable to the corporate world and to everybody
Mm-hmm.
else's life, but I don't think, is it a natural trajectory for a coach to become a speaker? Is that, how did that
I
happen?
would say that some are, but I'd say for most probably not. And also I even shared, and but I was part of this story that exploded all over the world. So I had a young man, his name was Jason McElwain, and he was on the autism spectrum. And what was really neat, Jason was a little guy, and he tried out for our team 3 consecutive years, and he never made the team. But yet he had this heart of gold, and he came to every practice, and not only the practices during the season, he came to all our off-season work. So his senior year, I told him as a gift, you still going to be our manager, but I was going to give him a uniform for our final home game. And to shorten the story here, because I could talk all day on it, is that I put him in with 4 minutes to go. He shot an air ball, his first shot. Then he missed his second shot. Then he made a 3-pointer. The place exploded. I kid people, I think God was a basketball fan. Not only did he score a basket, he made a 3. But then he went crazy. He ended up making 6 threes in about 3 minutes and ended up being our leading scorer of the game. I won an ESPY. Ironically, it's sad now because Kobe Bryant passed away, but Jason's idol was Kobe Bryant. And after that game, we ended up winning our first Sectional 5 championship 3 weeks later. And then he ended up winning the ESPY for the greatest sports moment of the year. And ironically, one of the 4 finalists was Kobe Bryant that year. Kobe had scored 81 points in an NBA game.
Wow.
And so Jason got a chance to meet him and actually beat him out for the ESPY for that year.
That's like a
So
dream come true, huh?
yeah, so that actually thrust me into the speaking. But as I've evolved, because I started mainly, I have a speech called Dreams Really Do Come True. I share a lot about the story, and I share some fundamentals of helping you make your dreams come true. But then I've branched off. I do a team talk. I do a couple leadership talks. I'm working actually on an online program on resilience because I think that's going to be a major key for all of us right now. So I think those are, kind of spin-offs. And it was interesting to me because early on, you had a good point. I was a teacher and a coach. I ran a successful basketball program. Now, I remember I spoke at a Franklin Covey Global Summit. How am I going to teach those people, right? But you realize that a lot of the things you learn as a leader and how to build a team are really applicable to business and everything in life. And you realize that I business people reach out to me and ask me for advice, and I think it's kind of comical because I've never run a business, other than my own little business now. But the leadership principles are something I continue to study. I'm right now I've accelerated my learning. I'm reading a book a week now, and it's just really it's fascinating to me because I think to me in building a team it all starts with leadership. And the better that you become as a leader, and the better, I think the second part, I mentioned earlier, is how do you keep something successful? I think the huge thing is when you start developing a servant leadership mindset where you turn the pyramid around, that I'm actually serving my team, and that you're teaching your team members how to become leaders. First how to lead themselves, and secondly, then how to lead others. And I think those are so hugely important. And that's why I think our program exploded, because we started to develop people that, with our philosophy of we over me, and that we were going to develop leaders. And, we put a lot of, thoughts into how can we create this atmosphere where they care about each other, but they're also going to be accountable to each other. And that's really powerful when you can make that happen. So,
Yeah, that's an excellent point, is the accountability piece. I was never so successful with my walking as when I was meeting a friend there, because, you don't feel like getting up, you don't feel like doing your thing, but you're like, well, I'm going to be letting her down. She'll be sitting there by herself. And once we stopped doing it, once she moved away, and I never walked that loop again. I mean, I ended up moving from the area and stuff like that, but it was just, that accountability piece is so, so powerful, so
yeah.
powerful.
You got a great point there, Christine, because I think one of the things in getting started, I think is very helpful, whether it's accountability partner, to having a coach, having a mentor, different things. But, like for me, I picked up later in life tennis. The nice part is when I play tennis, I always have an accountability partner because I'm playing somebody, right? So, so I'm going to show up. I'm going to show up on time. And those kinds of things are really crucial to building that consistent foundation, which is so essential to your success.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And choosing an accountability partner who is going to show up, who
Yeah,
has similar goals. And,
I,
yeah, if you don't have a good one, then it's
well,
like,
something we always talked about, with our players is, you're going to be the foundation of the people you associate the most with.
yes.
And if those people are pulling you down, it's like the old adage of the crabs, when all the crabs are in the cage and one tries to get out, the other one's pulling back down. And, I always told them that metaphor, because I think it's so powerful.
Yeah.
But then if you got, people that you're associating that are, raising your standards, they expect big things out of you. There's a big difference, in mindset, and all those things are really important.
There, it really is. And not only that, I think that there's a fear I mean, I don't think I'm unique in this, is, being like, it's almost like a fear of being the best and being alone up there on the pyramid.
Mm.
So if
Yeah,
you think, oh, I'm so much more successful than everybody I hang around with, and there's a little bit of exposure and a little bit of feeling of,
right,
oh gosh. But if everybody you associate with is a little bit more successful than you, or at least on par with you, then
right.
you can feel comfortable being your best.
Yes, exactly. That's a great point, without a doubt.
I want to just go back, because you were talking about Jason a little bit, and I know
Yeah.
that story is just so remarkable, but even more so because he wasn't even on the team. He wasn't. Was he ever? Did he play with you when you?
So he during when the off season, because he came to all our off seasons, so he would actually play in like summer league games and that kind of thing. And then he tried out for the team, so he played. Then once we had the team made, which he didn't make the 3 years. He served his last 2 years as the varsity team manager, which I was the coach of the varsity, and so he came every single day. He would do workouts with kids. Sometimes I'd let him go into a drill, but other than when we played him, where I let him practice with the team. But the neat thing of him was he just had. I always used to talk. We did a theme every single week during and 1 week we early in the season would always be on attitude, and I'd always give a quote every day. And one of my favorite quotes was, "Attitudes are contagious. Is yours worth catching?" And that's what Jason was. Jason, because he didn't quite comprehend everything about the big picture, but he did comprehend that he cared about the team deeply, and he would do anything for any of the kids on the team. If you wanted to stay after and shoot, he'd rebound for you for 45 minutes. I mean, he was that type of thing. And the really neat thing about that was I wrote a book called The Coach of a Miracle about it. And I share the whole story. We had a lot of issues that season. And Jason was kind of one of our linchpins. He really kind of helped us because he didn't completely understand how some of the difficulty. But the really cool thing was when he came in the game, I did not ask the kids to pass him the ball. I didn't know how they were going to. I knew they liked him, okay? But out of their own hearts, they passed him the ball every time. He was the only one that shot. In fact, I still kid him all the time. I said, "Jason, I'm still looking for your first assist. You never passed the ball once." Uh, but it was so cool to see how those group, kids decided, we're going to help this young man have a special night. And, it just was something that I'll cherish for the rest of my life, that the fact that, how they all came together and wanted to do that. And then we had a lot of issues that year, and to see Jason then come back after that game, because he's like now this world global star, and yet he goes back and he serves manager, and he wants, he told everybody, what, I love my game, but winning the sectional was the best thing that ever happened in his life. And that was so cool, because one of the things we always talked about was we over me philosophy,
Yeah.
and he embraced that better than almost any kid I ever coached. So.
Yeah. But you didn't know. I mean, and like the other kids on the team, they had no idea that he was going to be this all-star and hitting all these
No,
3-point
no,
shots. So
no,
it's amazing. It really is. I just
no.
find that whole thing just so inspirational. Like you say, like they handed it to him just so that he could have fun, just so that he could be
Yeah,
a part of the team, so he could feel special. And then he just goes and, I mean, and I think to him, he is a lesson in persistence, right? Like,
yeah,
no, didn't make
yeah.
the team, didn't make the team, your article's been rejected 100 times, you didn't
Right.
get the job 100 times, but hey, we're just going to keep coming back and trying again, and let me do what I can do. And I don't know, it's a great lesson. Uh-oh, you're frozen, Jim. I don't know if you can hear me. Shoot. Oh, come back. Oh, there you are. Okay, good. Sorry.
You froze for about, I don't know, 10 seconds there.
Yeah, I know you did too. Sorry about that. I don't know
I
what
don't know what
happened.
happened, but yeah, but it was truly, just the fact that everybody came together and wanted to do something special. And you're absolutely right. Going back to what you were sharing is, in fact, I'm working on a whole program on perseverance, because that's one of the keys I talk about in the dream speech, is that I learned a lot about him because, and I've told this, that I was a head coach for 30 years. Jason was the only student athlete I ever had that tried out for our team 3 years and didn't make it. I think I could count on one hand maybe 4 or 5 young men of the 30 years I coached, if they got cut from the team, actually tried out again next year. It was so rare because, people are embarrassed. And like you said, you get rejected all these times. But that didn't stop him. He was just relentless. And it was so important that he be part of us. And that's why I think it manifested like it did, because he cared so deeply about the team. That came back to him, the famous echo there. So
And it's just a beautiful inspirational story.
thank you.
So, Coach, do you prefer if I call you Coach or Jim?
Coach or Jim are both very acceptable. A lot of people call me. In fact, I have a manager for my speaking, and she never calls me Jim. It's always Coach.
Coach, yeah. So, do you have a favorite book? Do you have something that you return to again and again that you read periodically?
Yeah, I would say it's a very difficult question for me because I've read so many books, but I think my foundation book would be Dr. Covey's book, The 7 Habits.
Yeah.
I've studied that a lot, and it's funny. I'll tell you two quick things, because I'm into personal growth. So as much as I've studied basketball coaches, I love these personal growth, Tony Robbins and Jim Rohn and Stephen Covey. And interesting, I was speaking at an event many years ago when Jim Rohn was still alive, and somebody came out in the audience and said, "Coach, I know Jim Rohn personally. We're going to get you connected." That never came out. Then I saw Stephen Covey speak at an event, and my dream was to speak it for Franklin Covey because I loved all what he's about. And I got a chance to do it, but it was the year after he died. so I didn't get a chance. I met his some of his siblings and children, but I didn't get a chance to meet him. But I'm hoping someday that one of the people that I really admire that I'll get a chance to meet. But yeah.
You got to put that on your list of intentions. How am I going to get to meet this person or whoever
Yeah,
it may be?
exactly. Before he dies.
Yeah, exactly. Well, before it's too late.
Right.
So what should I have asked you that I failed to ask you? What do you want to share that I didn't touch on?
You know what? I'd say, do you want me to just quickly go through my leadership principles just to give people
Sure.
a foundation?
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. Yeah, thank you.
All right. So the 7 I talk about, first one is called clarifying your vision. And I'll just give you a very quick synopsis of each one. So on clarifying your vision, the first thing is that I talked about this earlier, but I think you have to have clarity about why you were put on this earth. I call it a personal mission statement. And then secondly, you've got to have clarity of what you're looking for your team mission, but then you need input from the team. If it's just strictly your mission, you're not going to get buy-in. So you got to make sure that they're buying it. Number 2 is the ability to build trust. I think that is so hugely important. And I have a few foundational things. I think one is being authentic, that you're consistently telling the truth to people. I think another one is that you say and do align. Okay, so if I tell you that I'm going to meet you at 7:00 in the morning, and if I don't show up or I show up late, that starts to fringe or break that trust. And then the third thing is I always talk about trying to change your mindset in catching people doing right, as opposed to catching people. Because as leaders, critiquing people is part of the job, no question about it. But sometimes we think that that's all we should do. And I think it's so important that we recognize when people do well and make sure that you praise them in various ways to do that. The third thing is what I call creating the edge. And I believe as a leader, it's so important that you keep finding ways to create an edge for your team. And, I think goal setting is a great way to clarify how to do that. I think adding other voices. I think the best leaders are not afraid to use other voices. Like I was probably ahead of my time. It's very much in vogue now, but I hired a strength coach before almost any other high school program did, because I thought that was something that could really help us. And it did. It helped us immensely. So finding ways to create an edge. The fourth one is being an effective communicator. And the thing I always go back to is that this is something I didn't do a very good job early. I was always the talker and not much of the listener. And the old adage, you have two ears, only one mouth, so you should listen twice as much. And when I became a better listener, that helped me immensely. I set up ways where I did one-on-one meetings. I did small group meetings. I really made sure that I wanted to know them as people and also know what they're all about and how I could best support and help them. The fifth one is a simple one, but we often don't do it very well, and that's the lead by example. And we used to talk to our players all the time that you're always on stage. So I think it's really important that you're the model for them, and that if you do that, I remember many years ago, our rule was on the road we had to wear a tie. But I wasn't a tie fan myself. So one time I didn't wear a tie, and I had a parent come up to me and go, "Coach, you expect the players," and I never, ever did it again. And it just showed me how important of leading by example. My sixth key is a leadership philosophy called leave a profit. And the concept is that what we always taught our players is we want to make everything better as opposed to worse. In other words, everything we touch, we want to turn into gold, not the garbage. And I always give this illustration. It's like when we went on the road to another school, if we walked into an opponent's locker room where we were going to change, and I saw a piece of garbage on the floor, I would pick it up. And what I was really trying to reinforce to our players that every place we go, we're going to make better, not worse. And I think that's a really important thing as a leader, to have that philosophy and live it as consistently as you possibly can. And then the last one is something I have mentioned earlier, but I think it's so hugely important, and it's gotten so much bigger in leadership now, is servant leadership, the ability to serve others as the leader and to grow other leaders. I think that's so powerful.
Thank you. That's gold. That's
So, thank you.
especially your servant leadership. It's so often, right? You have the insecure leader who just wants to take all the glory for themselves, and you can't build a team that way, right?
No, no.
If everybody feels like you have their back, they're going to give you more, they're going to do more, and everybody benefits.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll ask you, I'll share one thing that was very helpful to me. I got this from Jack Canfield, and I think it's one of the best things I've ever done, um, is a communication question. And I used to do this a lot with my players, especially at the end of the season. I would say, evaluate me as a coach from 1 to 10, with 10 being the best and 1 being the weakest. And sometimes I get a 10, but most of the time I wouldn't. But actually, that's what the power was, is the follow-up question. And then I would say to them is, okay, you see me as an 8. In your eyes, how can I become a 10? And that was gold. They would give me so much valuable information. Sometimes there's information that I couldn't use, but for the most part, opening that door and letting them share what they were seeing and how I could be better as a leader. And it was a great way to do that, because it started simple, but then we got a little bit more involved once, if I didn't receive a 10.
Oh, that's really good. I'm going to start sending people surveys to say, how was I as an interviewer now?
Yeah,
And they're going to
yeah.
be on the spot to tell me what I can do better.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you very much. That was fantastic.
Because they always say feedback is the breakfast of champions, but I think what we run into as leaders is our ego gets in the way, and the only feedback we want is what a great coach you are, or what a great leader. And as much as that feels good, that doesn't help you grow. And I think it's really important that you get your ears out there. Not all the critics are going to be helpful too either. As they always say, I don't know there's many critics that they've resurrected a statue of. So I think it's important that you realize, but there are people that, your inner circle, if they're telling you this and you're not listening, you're doing a real disservice to you and to, your team or organization.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you very, very much. I really
My
enjoyed
pleasure.
talking with you. And
Yeah, it was great.
I'm going to put all the books and resources that we talked about, as well as a
Sure.
link to your book and stuff
Yeah.
on the website. The website is getyourfillpodcast.com. So if you're
Okay.
listening on iTunes or Stitcher or whatever, pop over to the website and get some of the things that Coach Jim has shared with us. And definitely, how should people reach out to you if they want to have you?
So my website is coachjimjohnson.com. We have a free newsletter that we give out every month. I do a free weekly blog. And also, actually, I have on there on the website right now, we actually are doing a leadership webinar. I've teamed with a local college professor that actually is from Bangladesh. So we're going to talk a lot about diversity. From my perspective, being a white male, of of the diversity of my team, but she's going to give you great insight because she got a degree in Bangladesh. She got her master's degree in the Netherlands, and then got her doctorate and now teaches in the US. So I think it's going to be a great webinar. That's on August 12th, and there's a link on there, and that's complimentary as well. So
Excellent.
if
That
I can
sounds like
ever
a lot
help
of fun.
anybody, I've actually changed for life right now. Hopefully this isn't forever, but I've put together a bunch of virtual programs, and so if I can help anybody with that, please reach out to me. So.
Beautiful. Thanks very much. Awesome.
My pleasure. And you're going to send me a link so I can help promote this as well? So,
Yeah, it's going to air the end of August. So
okay.
I'll send you, I'm going to